Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on MP Blue Retriever, playing as the Elves against the Norscans. So you can see these crazy savages here, very much, you look at these things, freaking Fimir with their one-eyed beasts. But regardless, we are here as Elves, and this has been an interesting matchup, but Norscans definitely have quite a few advantages, I think, in this matchup. I'm not entirely sure who it favors more. So I just decided to, I've been trying different builds, and this was one I've had some success with, and yeah, either way, let's hop right in. I decided to bring Teclis here, so no Alariel. So if you were hoping for the Everqueen, tough luck. It's not going to happen here. I decided to bring Teclis. That's because of his spells. I did make a slight mistake here. I brought Kindle Flame. It can technically synergize with Sisters of Avalorn, but I didn't bring Flame Sword of Ruin otherwise, so this was a mistake, simply something I forgot about. Otherwise, brought Wild Heart, Shield of Sapphire, Great Arcane Conduit, but most importantly, Net, Enfeebling Foe, Flock of Doom, Regrowth. So these four spells I'm hoping could really help me, depending on what my opponent brings. If my opponent decides to bring Mammoth Play, if he decides to do Mammoth Play, if he decided to do heavy Skin Wolf play, anything like that, this could help. Bound Fiery Convocation, which I hope will help against squishy units, and then Potion of Troy for the self-heal. Alongside him, two unveteraned or unimproved nobles. Both are still a decent choice, I think. They're just honestly, this Goon Squad was competitive before, and I think it still is. The double noble gives you some anti-large presence, some armor piercing anti-large. So hopefully, if my opponent brought mammoths, these guys, while they probably won't beat a mammoth, they could definitely put some hurt into it and do okay for themselves. The front line is a bit of a mishmash. 4 units of spearmen screening away, slightly veteraned up, as well as 2 white lines of Krays, who I hoped would trade rather effectively with, say, a front line of Berserkers or Marauder Champions, which I think is more likely than a mass of Marauders, given that the High Elves have a lot of options to shut squishy infantry down, but that's not able to chew through their infantry, so I figured that Berserkers were the likely pick. Berserkers are quite a favorite. The second line, 2 Sisters of Avalorn. These guys, of course, have armor piercing, fire, magic, decent melee stats. Don't be too misled by their missile stats, though. Their ranged armor piercing is actually exactly the same as Gladiator with Starfire Shafts. It's just that they have a bit more non-AP and slightly lower reload time. So their damage and their graphics, while impressive, is not that good, especially given that their 1100 cost. But they do have those crazy melee stats, and that will hopefully compensate a little bit. And of course, they do give the High Elves an AP that they didn't have, AP damage source that they didn't have before. Then we do have the Fireborn over on the flank, and this is a unit I really want to try out in this matchup and think can be pretty potent. They do have, of course, and actually these guys synergize well with Kindle Flame as well. I forgot about that. But nonetheless, these guys, of course, have fire damage. So with their monster stats, I hope they could trade pretty well with Norscan Skin Wolves and all that sort of stuff. So definitely had some high expectations for these guys, and of course with their fire resistance, you don't have to worry too much about Sisters of Avalorn friendly firing you. Finally, a single unit of Lyrian Reavers. I figured I didn't want to be defending units of archers in the back line, because they can't really look out for themselves, so I figured, a unit of Lyrian Reavers just to harass Berserkers and save the ammo on my Sisters would be good. Now, for my opponent's build, Berserkers, as expected, nothing too surprising there. You can see 4 units over here in the front line, backed by Fimir, and this has been a pretty powerful combo, and pretty common combo. I'm not entirely sure why. This wasn't something we saw a lot in Warhammer 1, but it's something we're seeing a lot now in Warhammer 2, I think. A Fimir sort of Death Star you get with good old missile resist from the Fimir, or on the Fimir, and you get armor sundering and magic attacks. So honestly, the Fimir can help you deal with everything from Phoenix Guard to Swordmasters to anything like that. And the Berserkers with their monsters melee stats, and the High Elves don't have that much armor to begin with. They'll definitely be able to do really well, I think. Behind that, my opponent does have a single unit of Marauder Hunters with Javelins, just there to deal with limited large and provide some limited range support. Wolfric, of course, coming in with Hunter of Champions, the Boat, and Seafang, and Fight or Die. So this is a pretty common thing you're going to see with Wolfric. It's just him on his horse. He does rather well at hunting heroes that way. Then a Shaman Sorcerer of Death with Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech. Now, Fate of Buna has been nerfed again, but it's still an incredibly powerful spell and still incredibly frustrating to play against. Honestly, I think it needs a rework, but it still hasn't happened. On the flanks, my opponent does have 2 Skin Wolves on one flank, armored in Maws of Savagery. On the other end, he does have 2 Horsemen with Throwing Axes. But I do kind of position my spears here to interdict, and we get a nice little net here on the Marauder Horsemen, hitting both of them with an Overcast and a Mintok, and immediately get Techless and the Nobles in there. And you can see these guys are getting torn apart. Marauder Horsemen aren't really meant to deal with this sort of thing, and they definitely don't have the survivability for it. I was starting to move my Fireborn over there, but then decided it's probably best to use them somewhere else. And you can see already the Sister of Avalorn laying the smackdown on these Familiar Warriors. They're already down by about 1,200 or so HP, or actually more, and getting absolutely destroyed. So I do try to switch out, do a bit of a switcheroo here, pushing the white lines into the front line instead of the spears, and trying to keep the spears back, keep them in reserve. You can see my opponent hits my sisters with Fate of Buna, which I think it's a bit of a waste. It's honestly not that valuable. You can see, though, I do get a nice little fiery convocation here on the Marauder Berserkers, roasting them a little bit, but not doing too much damage, I don't think. Nonetheless, you can see the Spearmen here tying down the Sorcerer as the Fireborn charge into the Marauder Berserkers. And you can see my opponent did get a nice little Sea Fang there as well, though I don't think it did very much. Perhaps hoping to slow my Fireborn. Nonetheless, Fireborn do quite a bit of damage, and then immediately bounce back as my opponent has revealed his plan with the Maws of Savagery coming out of the woodwork. So at this point, it was definitely looking a bit grim. You can see these white lines routing already because of that combo from the Fimir and the Marauder Berserkers. You can see the Spearmen here trying to hold them up. These white lines are actually not trading all that well with the Marauder Berserkers, and that's of course because they don't win very quickly, or they can't win quickly, and the Marauder Berserkers start getting their procs of Berserk, which first grants them 20%, 2% physical resist, and it's eventually going to grant them more melee attack and all that sort of stuff. As the white lines are getting weaker because they're losing martial prowess. Nonetheless, I do get a nice little snag here on the Maws of Savagery, hit him with a net of Mintok, which actually will trigger that additional fire weakness from Kindle Flame. If we look at their fire weakness, it's down to 47%, so they're getting absolutely melted by the anti-large fire damage Fireborn. And this was a synergy I didn't even think about going into this game, and I quite frankly forgot about it. I got huge value out of right here. In the meantime, you can see the Fimir are swinging around the back, but I do snag him with the Noble, and the Noble's actually going to be able to trade really well with him. He's got 60 melee defense, which more than makes up for the slight lack of armor there, and he does have AP, anti-large, and good melee stats, so he's going to be able to chop these guys pretty good. In the meantime, these Skinwolves' armor do push in as well to fight the Fireborn, but there's a Noble in there. He's pressuring Wolfrake. You can see the Skinwolves getting beaten down a little bit. It's definitely a bit of a pit fight here, but the Sisters are able to start pull clear because of that sacrifice. You can see over here the Berserkers berserking, tearing through the white lines. And definitely they're very cost efficient. I definitely completely overestimated the white lines. Honestly, the white lines are basically a waste. With this sort of trading rate, I don't think they're really worthwhile. But you can see I get my Sisters clear and start pouring Withering Fire into the Skinwolves. And you can see they're over here just kind of sitting, not sure what to do. I do push Techless into them, which normally would be suicidal, but with this much fire coming in. And of course the Sisters have armor piercing. They've got fire damage, which is playing on their weakness. Kindle Flame's been active for a good chunk of this game, so I've been getting good values out of it. Even though unwittingly and unplanned. The Spearmen over here, though, buying time against the Marauder Hunters. In the meantime, you can see these Lyran Reaver Archers chipping away at the Berserkers, who I see as the biggest threat. And my opponent is constantly hitting Techless with Spirit Leech, trying to whittle him down, and I think this is a bit of a mistake. Techless has Potion of Troy. It's not like Tyrion, where you can get to proc his Heart of Avalorn and then whittle him down. It's not Alariel, where you can make her waste spells or abilities to heal herself. With Techless, he just pops Potion of Troy and sacrifices 30 seconds of ability recharge, but that's not the end of the world. He can heal. So regardless, you can see the Sea Fang is actually going to go down here on the Sister of Avalorn, slicing through him, doing a lot of damage, and this was something I didn't even notice in the game at the time, but you can see I do push Techless into the Shaman Sorcerer of Death, start wailing on him with the arrows. You can see I do actually snag Wolfrake here with a net of Mintok, getting him surrounded. Kindle Flame is active because of that, and he is getting absolutely torn apart. Wolfrake doesn't have the best melee defense. He can't buff it with anything, and the Noble is pretty solid. Noble's got, I do believe, 35 bonus for its large if we look. It's a little difficult to look, but yeah, Noble's got 35 bonus for its large. In the meantime, you can see things are looking a little dire on the flank here. The Spearmen and the Noble pushing back the Fimir Warriors with the help of the Lyran Reaver Archers, who are just firing shot after shot into these Berserkers, forcing him back. But my opponent has got his horsemen back and is now pulling them around. You can see the Sisters here holding their own, doing their very best and just resisting this Fimir advance. And they managed to snipe down most of them and force the whole unit to break. So a little bit of a victory there. My infantry keeps rallying because they're High Elves, but at the same time, there's not too much they can do against units like these Marauder Berserkers at this point. But with some Withering Fire from the Sisters, you can see these guys are not having a good day. They actually rampage. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it got considered as melee. They got close to Techless, but they now get charged by the Fireborn and they're in for a bad day. And of course, as I mentioned before, the Fireborn don't have to worry too much about all this friendly fire because they have fire resistance of their own, 70% of it. In the backlines, the Marauders are being a nuisance. You can see they're trying to run amok, but I do get the Lyrian Reavers on them, and the Lyrian Reavers will do a pretty decent job against these guys. They've got better melee stats, and you can see I know they've already been called last cannons by on the streams, and the Sisters of Avalon, they're just wailing on these Marauder horsemen and absolutely wiping them. So these guys are forced to rout, and at this point my opponent's army does decide to shatter to army losses. So is this the most competitive builds? I don't know. I don't really think so. I think the white lines are a waste. You can see if you look at the kill counts, 19 to 53, I'd have been better off bringing the Regiment of Renowned Spearmen and a normal unit of Spearmen. They would have done about as much damage and held for probably longer with their better melee defense. Yeah, I don't want the white lines. I don't think are that great. I thought they'd be better, but with the Fimir combo, I don't think they are. One of the interesting things I trying to do is make use of Hand of Glory on the Sisters, try to get the highest possible rate of fire out of them, try to dumpster units before they can get too close. But as for this build, I do think it's fairly decent. Like the tech combo with Techless with the two nobles has always been strong and still is. It really shuts down this sort of flank play, these sort of annoying skin wolves, and can shut down Wolfric and a Shaman. The biggest problem is, of course, Fate of Buna, which I don't think my opponent got off this game, but that can be a major problem. Otherwise, the Lyrian Reavers are another iffy pick, but I honestly didn't know what else to put in there. If you drop these guys to spears, you could level these guys up to the Regiment of Renown variant, which would be nice. Sisters of Avalon did a great job just mowing through the heavily armored infantry. They tore through the heavily armored units. They tore through the Fimir. They tore through the Skin Wolves. And then in late game, they actually applied some pressure to the Berserkers as well. But really, I think this build is okay. It's in a decent spot. Definitely have to watch out for Marauder Berserkers. Definitely have to watch out for Skin Wolves as High Elves. Yeah, but either way, good game to my opponent, Peppo here. So far, it's basically just trying to glean what I can about the matchups and the meta and all that sort of stuff. But hopefully that you guys did find this interesting. Hopefully you found it entertaining. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticisms, anything like that, be sure to post them and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.